We're going to move on to our next candidate interviewee for this evening, and that is Dr. Vanessa Keesler. Dr. Keesler, we are ready when you are. Yeah, we'll just wave. Good evening. Hello. Welcome. Thank you for being with us this evening. Following our interview questions this evening, you will have the opportunity to make concluding remarks and ask a question as time allows. We've had the opportunity, to review your resume. Please tell us how your background and experiences make you a good fit to be our next superintendent.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, especially it is quite a time in our community and world right now. So I kept waiting to hear this was going to be a Zoom interview instead of a in-person interview. In preparing for this interview, I had the opportunity to review materials on your website, and I came across a survey that you did of your community back in November, where you asked what were the qualities they wanted to see in the next superintendent. And the results of that survey, some were summarized in a word cloud, or I think the technical term is a wordle, if you prefer that. And on that wordle, there were 5 words that really stood out. And those words were educator, teacher, managing, administrator, and diverse. And I believe I have all those qualities. I am a lifelong educator. I started my career in public education when I was 19 years old, working in the Boston public school system, running the Gear Up program, and then became a teacher in the Brockton public school system in Massachusetts. So the early part of my career is that boots on the ground experience as a teacher, an educator, and a teacher leader running programming in large urban school districts. So I have that direct service experience. After my time out east, I returned home. I am a native Michigander, technically a native mid-Michigander. I grew up about half an hour from here. If you kind of head toward Flint and stop when you hit a cornfield, that's where you'd find my hometown of Corona. And I began my time at MSU. Go Green. I know there are Spartans on the board. All right, good. I wasn't sure how that would work out, but I know Spartans love to have that school spirit. I began my time at MSU. And then 10 years ago, started at the Michigan Department of Education as deputy superintendent. And that's where I get the bulk of my managing and administrative experience in the K-12 setting. My division is a complex division. We have 250 people, 4 offices, 21 units, and over 100 different work streams and initiatives. And I have supervised and worked directly with K-12 policies, really all of the K-12 policies that there can be. That includes special education, career tech education, assessment, accountability, everything related to educators, from preparation to certification to placement to educator evaluation to professional learning, curriculum, instruction, standards, worked with our lowest performing schools. If you name it, I have supervised it and worked directly with it and helped manage and administrate that both within the department but in working with districts around the state. I bring that up, and I think that makes me a good fit for Lansing because Lansing, as you all well know, is a very, very complex place. You have lots of initiatives going on. You have 27 schools, 1,700 employees, almost 11,000 students. And so having someone who has that direct experience working and managing many different initiatives, work streams, I think is an asset for me in this position. I also, as opposed to having experience in 1 or 2 districts, I've worked with districts all around the state, hundreds of districts. I've seen what they're doing in the Upper Peninsula, in Southeast Michigan, and everywhere in between, rural, suburban, urban. And I think that makes me a good fit for this district because I know you to be a district that innovates. You want to find the best practice and the best ideas out there and bring them here for Lansing students. And I think that's something I can bring to this role.
Thank you. Please share an example of a time you have led a sustained multi-year improvement initiative. Be specific regarding the situation, the task at hand, your specific role, and the outcome.
In 2015, the federal government passed the Every Student Succeeds Act, which reauthorized the No Child Left Behind Act. And you may be thinking this example is going to be really boring, and I hope to make it not too boring. I have a reason for choosing this one. I was the lead deputy superintendent tasked with figuring out how Michigan would craft this plan. So I had a twofold opportunity here. One was to make sure that we made a plan that met all the compliance boxes that the feds needed, but more importantly, advanced our goals as a state, helped us drive forward key parts of our strategic plan. And the other opportunity I had was to create and enact a really wide-reaching stakeholder engagement experience where we involved many people not only in reacting to the plan, but actually in creating the plan. So like I said, I was the lead deputy on the effort. The first thing I did was set this vision that this plan wouldn't just be another plan. It wouldn't be just a plan to do a plan. And that we sometimes at the department, we pass that on to our districts too, right? We make a plan just to have a plan, and then we ask districts to make a plan just to have a plan. And that's a lot of wasted time in an education system that needs to support students. So setting the vision that this plan would drive our bigger goals forward, and then building that stakeholder engagement effort. So how we did it is we started with 9 action teams and 2 external advisory committees. The action teams wrote different parts of the plan, and all of these committees were staffed with external people, external stakeholders, people from different perspectives: principals, teachers, superintendents, advocacy organizations, arts advocates, civil rights groups, parents, unions, ISDs, I mean, you name it, we had the perspectives on the teams actually writing to the plan, and then the 2 advisory committees were reacting to the plan and providing input. That was over 250 people involved in just creating the plan alone. And then once we had a draft, we had to take it out and see what the larger community thought. And in that case, that was the state. So we did over 30 presentations, we did 7 regional feedback forums around the state, and talked with another 400 people about the plan and got their reactions to it. We also did 2 rounds of online feedback with parents, community members, stakeholders, and that garnered over 3,400 responses there. So we took all of this feedback and had to come to some sort of a plan, right, that met the needs of the state as well as the federal government. And we had to navigate very complex political waters with this. We had to work with what the U.S. Department of Ed wanted, what the Michigan legislature needed, what the governor's office was looking for. The State Board of Education had very clear vision for this work. The state superintendent, all of the education organizations. And so we had to find a way to create a plan that engaged and came to some consensus with all those groups. The outcome, our plan was submitted and accepted in November of 2017. So that was a great outcome. I chose this example, though, like I said, for 2 reasons. One is the questions about sustaining multi-year improvement initiatives. So while the plan was the first step, it actually kicked off a number of other pieces of work that I am in charge of sustaining and moving forward. Things like a whole child-focused approach to school and district improvement planning that's replacing our old process. Working on diversifying our educator workforce, and supporting our lowest performing districts and schools with the partnership district model. And I worked on those, or I led those initiatives after the plan was submitted and successful. And I also chose it because I think it shows my ability to do strategic planning with a coalition of stakeholders. I saw online that the Lansing strategic plan ended in 2019. Presumably there is another strategic plan in the future of the district. So I think I have this and other experiences were good experiences leading up to help me support the district in that.
Managing vision and purpose involves anticipating future trends, creating a compelling vision, and communicating that vision. Describe a situation that conveys your capability in this area.
Much of being a deputy superintendent at the Michigan Department of Education is about managing vision, looking at future trends, keeping everybody rowing in the same direction. But I actually want to choose something from my resume to highlight that's a little different. I'd like to talk about my research practice partnership work. I've heard it noted before that I'm a researcher, and I always really take that as a great compliment, especially in the presence of other excellent researchers at the board and elsewhere. But I really don't see myself as a researcher. I'm really more of a research facilitator and a translator, and someone who believes fundamentally in the power of research and evidence to help drive policy and practice. When I first came to the state 10 years ago, we had a lot of data, but very little information. So we wanted to make decisions in a data-driven way, but it was hard to turn that data into information we could use. And we didn't have the infrastructure in place to do it. Question asks about managing future trends or anticipating future trends. And this is really critical when you're trying to use research to inform policy and practice. If you wait until the policy question is asked to find a research partner, forge a relationship, get them the data, articulate the questions, get the results, I mean, the policy moment has passed by the time all that happens. The decision has been made with or without evidence, and it's gone. So if you want to have research present for the decisions, you have to look ahead and have lots of studies going so that when somebody asks a question, you can say, you know what, we're studying that. Let's get that research partner in here. So I created what is now known as the Michigan Education Research Institute. It is a partnership between the Michigan Department of Education, the Center for Educational Performance and Information, or CEPI. We love acronyms at the state. State bureaucracy wouldn't function without acronyms, I'm pretty sure. So MDE, CEPI, and then the University of Michigan and Michigan State University. And MARY, again, another acronym, it has two parts. One part is this infrastructure to get data out to the research community nationwide. So they help provide data to researchers and support them in using it. At the present time, we have over 70 different research projects in process. Everything from studies on special education, career technical education. We are evaluating our partnership district model, as well as Michigan's Read by Grade 3 law. So we have actual evidence about how that law is supporting or not supporting students in Michigan. The other part of the partnership is the researchers working directly with and for the state to answer questions of interest to us. So those last two studies, the partnership district and the Read by Grade 3 evaluation, is work they're doing directly on our behalf in partnership with us. In the last question, I used the word we a lot because it was a team effort. You know, I was the lead deputy, but there's always a team that works on things. Here I'm saying I, and I'm saying that somewhat intentionally because I really am, while I could not do this without my partners at U of M and MSU and CEPI, at the department, this has really been my passion and my baby for the last 10 years. I've been the one to create the vision, to create shared ownership around the vision with 4 different state superintendents and with my team. Getting my team to see that we don't do research when we're done with our real work, but research is part of the real work. And the reason that this has been such a passion for me actually goes back to when I was a teacher. When I was, in the classroom teaching every day, I thought I could probably do a better job of this if I had more evidence, there's all this data around me, if I knew how to understand it better, I could do a better job for my kids and for my school. But I didn't know how, no one around me seemed to know how, and so that's why I left the classroom in the first place, to get those skills. And why it's been so important to me to make sure at the state that we have that infrastructure to look at policy in an evidence-supported way. I would love the opportunity to build those kind of partnerships at a district, school, and classroom level.
Thank you. Please tell us what the term culturally competent means to you. Give us an example of how you demonstrate this characteristic and your experience in bringing a diverse group of people to consensus on a difficult issue.
To me, culturally competent is about the ability to recognize and reflect on and embrace all cultures in a given organization or setting. It also requires that I understand about my own culture and how that interacts with the cultures around me, and that I think about possible implicit bias that I have or that others have. None of us know everything about the cultural background and what people bring to the table, but we can always adopt that learning stance and have those listening ears and seek to create a situation and environment that's safe and inclusive for all backgrounds, cultures, and people. I appreciate this question for Lansing with the vibrancy and diversity of your district. I was, again, doing some research, noted that you have 68 different languages spoken here and students from 73 different countries. And that's just one slice of the diversity that's in this district. So having a culturally competent leader who is reflective, supportive, and engaged in making sure the Lansing School District remains a place that embraces all cultures, I think is critical, so I appreciate that you're asking it. My example of a challenge I've experienced bringing a diverse group of people to consensus, I'd like to talk about my work on the Michigan Social Studies standards. So if any of you followed this, I see some people chuckling. 5 years ago, my good colleagues Jim Cameron and Linda Forward and I decided that it was time to update the social studies standards and make them more inclusive and bring them into, kind of now, make them representative of learning and social studies in the present day. So standards are contentious, and social studies standards possibly the most so. This is something that people feel very deeply about. How we talk about history and culture and civics and economics is really, you're touching on deeply held beliefs. So we knew we needed a process that engaged a wide range of voices. We started by crafting the standards with a diverse group of experts, and we made sure to get experts from around the state and from different perspectives on social studies. We also created a bias review committee so that a committee was looking at the standards specifically for potential sources of bias. And then I have a couple unique examples of engagement that we did that I think speak to what it takes to really bring in consensus on through a diverse group of people. The first part is we did government-to-government consultation with Michigan's 12 federally recognized tribes. And what made this different than normal stakeholder engagement is each of those tribes is a sovereign nation of their own. And so we had to, it's not like other stakeholder engagement where you can say, send us a representative of the tribes. We needed to go as a government to each tribal government and have conversations about how they viewed the standards, feedback that they had, and we had to really respect that government-to-government relationship. We also had to increase, I would say, I had to increase my cultural competency. We had to make sure those meetings were reflective of how they wanted to conduct business. So in-person meetings that had plenty of time for feedback and for thinking, going to them, not always asking them to come to Lansing. So we were able to get the feedback and get the 12 tribes supportive of our standards and get the standards to be more reflective, appropriately reflective of our Indigenous citizens. We also had the opportunity to work with our Sikh community, S-I-K-H. I used to think it was pronounced Sikh. If you look it up online, it says both pronunciations. But what I learned from our friends with the standards is that it is Sikh. And the first draft of or an early draft of the standards minimized how much Sikhism was talked about. So things that said like the major world religions, for example, Christianity, Islam. Sikhism is the 5th largest religion in the world, and our standards were not reflective of that. So we needed to fix that miss in the standards, but we also needed to create a space for the community to educate us and others about their religion and their history. So they came to a State Board of Education meeting and shared, and that was, I think, made the standards better, but also helped us as individuals. And then finally, we had to find consensus in the standards politically. There were strong feelings on the left, there were strong feelings on the right, and standards, while they always are political, they don't need to be partisan. We had to find standards that were fair and accurate and supported facts, and also supported students in engaging with those facts in a critical manner. So after all this work, we did pass standards. It did take us 5 years. It was a labor of love on our parts. Particularly Jim and Linda deserve a lot of credit for their work on this. And I think the one important learning is, I don't know if we reached true consensus, but we reached a place where the standards were fair and where people understand why we put in what was in and why was out was out. We were transparent about the end goal.
Tell us how you maintain visibility and accessibility for staff, parents, and community groups.
I think visibility is the precursor to accessibility. So if you're visible, it helps people feel like you're accessible as a leader. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've done this in my current role, but I would like to spend most of my time on how I would approach this in Lansing. I think this is a place where I've done a lot of intentional thinking about it in a new role, so I'd like to share that. In my current role, I'm very visible to my staff. I do things like walkthroughs on the floors in the cubes. I attend unit and office meetings, and so I'm just, go to their meetings, not just to tell them something, but just to listen to what they're doing at the meeting. And I meet each person in my division individually when they start, just to put a face with a name, to introduce myself, to learn about their background, but also to share with them my open door policy, and to reiterate, they can email me or text me, and I'd be happy to always respond and speak with them at any point. So shifting to Lansing, to be visible, starting with that visibility, as you well know, it is a big organization, has a really talented executive team, and so I think the superintendent needs to focus on that visibility, that connection, promoting the district and being out, not necessarily staying at central office and running all the day-to-day, although that's an important part of the role too. But again, there's a talented executive team for a reason. So I would be present and visible, and not just in the school day, but starting there. So I would spend my time in the buildings and the classrooms, in the lunchrooms, on the playgrounds, but also in the food service areas and the custodian offices and the transportation garage. Just being with the students and staff of the Lansing School District, learning what they're working on, answering questions, and then extend that beyond the school day. One of the first things I would do is ask all of you for your recommendations. Where should I be in the community? Are there events? Are there opportunities to meet parents and stakeholders that I might not know about? And this one may sound a little silly, but I would load up on my Lansing School District spirit wear and wear it all the time. I love spirit wear. I'm a big nerd about it. My kids make fun of me. I have a whole closet of it with their sporting events, but I think it's a really tangible way to be like, I'm part of the Lansing School District and I'm proud of that. And I think it can generate conversations too when you're out and about. But visibility isn't enough. I would need to be accessible as a leader as well. So in addition to being able to contact me and the team by email and phone, and working with the team to set, if they, I assume they already have these, but if we don't, we could set them together, rules about we respond to emails and phone calls within 24 hours or 48 hours, some reasonable time frame. I would love to see us expand Lansing's social media presence, both as a district and for me as the superintendent. So being on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and whatever the new platform is that'll be launched soon. My kids said I might have to make a TikTok. Sounds kind of terrifying, but I'm willing to try it if it helps us connect with the youth in the district. They also pick on me because of Facebook. They said, Mom, all the middle-aged people are on Facebook. And I'm like, well, great. I can hang out with, my friends. That's where I should be then. The point is, all of these platforms reach different parts of our community, and so having a presence on all of those is a way to be accessible to kids, staff, and community members. If we don't already have these here in the district, I would want to have student and parent advisory councils to the superintendent. I think that's an important way to hear directly from people and be able to engage deeply on issues and workshop ideas. And then finally, I know this job is not a 9-to-5 job. I know it's not the sort of thing where it hits 5 o'clock and I go home and come back the next day. I would make sure that all of you, obviously, the team, and all the staff in Lansing had a way to contact me, my cell phone number or my email, and I would take that seriously. If a teacher reaches out and said, I have this issue, I would make sure to be responsive and work with the team, the executive team, to solve problems or to be the kind of leader who they know will be there for them when they need it.
Often we learn from successfully facing challenges or experiencing mistakes or failures. Please share a time when this was the case for you. What did you learn from the experience? How did you apply what you learned?
A few years ago, I had a brilliant idea. So you can see maybe where this already is falling apart, right? I had this idea that we should form something called the Michigan Teacher Corps. So kind of like a Peace Corps, we would find teachers who wanted to be part of the Michigan Teacher Corps, and then we'd find districts who wanted these teachers, and we'd place them, and there'd be a lot of recognition. It'd be a big deal for the teachers and the districts. I still actually like this idea, but it didn't work out when we tried it the first time. So I called in a staff member and I said, I've got a great idea. Let's build this Michigan Teacher Corps. Go do it. And she said, okay. And we never really got it off the ground. And I think there's two big reasons for that. The first is, no matter how great your idea is as a leader, you still need a coalition of people. You need people to have shared ownership with it. It's not just about how much I like the idea, especially in a big system, in a big state, or in a big district. You need other champions, other people who think it's a good idea too. And the second reason I think it failed is I never pressure tested it with people who thought it was a stupid idea, which frankly, that's what you need to do, right? Is take your idea and find people who like it the least and get them to ask you questions and make it a better idea. So while the idea was strong, it had some flaws, and I didn't find those until it was too late. So now when I launch work, I'm very intentional to do a few things. Always articulate the vision first, like I talked about with the ESSA plan or with some other things, and see if we have shared ownership on the vision. Are people on board with this? Can we move this forward? And then, like I said, go find the people who like the idea the least and say, what are all the issues with this idea? Let's get it to where it's stronger. Let's make it stronger together. And keeping in mind that adage, sometimes I think these things are a little corny, but I like this one for this reason. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I think that is really important when you're making change in large systems.
Please describe how you would work to create a learning and working environment that is welcoming, inclusive, and increasingly diverse. How would you make sure that this is supported across the district and community?
I think this is a really critical question, to have a learning and working environment that is that welcoming and inclusive and diverse. So I think I have a couple things that I would do on this one. The first is emphasizing student voice. And actually, this is something I know Lansing already does really well. I know you do surveys of your students, and then you use the results of that to inform professional learning with your teachers. This is a practice that I regularly brag about when I'm out on my district visits around the state. I say, you know what Lansing's doing? You should think about doing that. It's a really great idea. And the reason I think that student voice is so important, why I've been pushing us at the department to support districts in doing it more, and why I would include it here or continue to do it here in Lansing, is students are the ones who can tell us where we're meeting the mark and where we're missing it. They're really the voices who tell us where the system maybe is having inequitable outcomes, where we're not reaching the learners the way we need to. They may not use those words, but they're the ones who know. You know, no educator ever sets out to do a policy or a program or an initiative that is bad for some kids or works poorly for some kids, but that is what happens sometimes. Not everything works for every student. And so when you listen to students, you can hear that, and it can create a learning environment that is welcoming and where we can be constantly improving as a district. I also think it's important to look at our hiring practices. This is work I've done at the department, looking at how what credentials we expect, what background qualifications, the questions that we ask. Is there implicit bias in any of those things? Are there unintended barriers or consequences? Are we keeping out otherwise qualified applicants on things that maybe aren't as central to the position, or maybe presume access that not everybody has? So I would love to continue that work here in Lansing, working with the HR team to look at what we already have in place and any improvements we can make. I think that also helps us with recruitment. I know recruiting an increasingly diverse workforce is a goal for the Lansing School District. I saw that in your board materials as well. And finally, I think talking honestly about the funding model in Michigan and how school funding works. So this is, again, work I've done in my current job, advocating with the legislature at both the state and the federal level for more equitable approaches to funding, more investments into things like special education, career tech education, at-risk funding, bilingual funding, recognizing that not all students they don't all come in with the same things, and they don't all need the same things from a district, and not all districts have the same needs either. And so a one-size-fits-all funding model is not good for a lot of districts. And I would love to continue the advocacy here in Lansing. I think that would help us. And actually, I have one more point on this one. I think the final part of creating this welcoming environment is sometimes being willing to say some uncomfortable things. So in my current role, I often lead stakeholder groups on assessment or accountability, or groups where we talk about post-secondary transitions. And there's usually an uncomfortable moment where somebody says something about those kids. Well, those kids can't learn, or not every kid's going to go to college. And while I love how you've handled it here with the Lansing Pathways, where you've thought consciously about creating individual pathways for each student through K-12 and beyond that makes sense for them. When people say that not every kid language, I always say, what kid are you thinking about when you say that? And are you trying to increase equity in our system by lowering expectations for some students? That's not how we do it. We have to keep high expectations and recognize that kids need differentiated supports to get there, and sometimes that requires saying that honestly, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable.
How do you recruit, develop, and lead a management team? Give us an example of how you've done this in the past.
For me, the team is everyone. At the department, it's my whole division, everybody from my direct reports to the secretaries in my division. And here in Lansing, I would think of it similarly. But I'm going to talk probably more specifically about what I do with my direct reports, and then with the idea that a lot of these practices you can scale throughout the whole team. I think the first part is for recruitment. A couple things that I think are important in recruitment. One is hiring on potential. So again, people if they have the potential and the qualities to do the job, that's a great opportunity to get people into a position and grow them. I think it's important to recruit a balance of internal and external. Not always, people who work within the organization need to see that there's career ladders and opportunities for advancement. But if you only go internal, the organization becomes a little too myopic, a little too inward facing. So bringing in recruiting externally brings fresh perspective in, different skills, but it can be a little demoralizing to the internal team if you always go external. So finding that balance of talent. And then for me, when I'm hiring in my direct reports, I like to look for complementary skill sets. I have a lot of strengths as a leader, but no leader is good at everything. And so having people on my team who fill in those gaps or who push me in ways I think is important. And I encourage my directors to do that as well, to think about building a team of skill sets. Then once we've recruited on the development part, I think it's important for everybody to have an individual growth plan. And with my current directors, they're all very high performing. They're wonderful, they work hard. So it can be tempting to say, you're doing great, keep doing great, thanks for coming. But that's not very motivating or helpful to a staff member who's trying to grow professionally. So giving them specific growth, creating together specific growth goals, and then working throughout the year to give them really specific feedback. For example, I have one of my directors who is always working on how she approaches challenging topics in a meeting when something might be contentious. She wants to work on her approach there. So we regularly debrief after meetings where I say, I thought your words were really good, or your body language maybe, and she gives me similar feedback too, actually, because we're working on this together, how we handle challenging topics. I have my own learning development plan. Every year I ask my directors and managers to give me something that I'm doing well, because who doesn't like a little bit of encouragement, right? As well as something to work on, and I create that into a plan that I share with my whole division and then hold myself accountable to transparently with them. And finally, in terms of leading a team, there's a couple things that I think are really important. One is setting, as a leader, I try to set that high-level vision and the guardrails and then empower staff to move forward. So recognize their experts and professionals, give them space to lead and grow, and help them barrier break and find resources, but I always try to avoid micromanaging or taking away their agency, just supporting them as they move forward. And giving them feedback, course correction if we need to, but again, it's in a supportive environment. And I'm always committed to no gotcha games. If I say to someone, you're in charge of this, you handle it, I trust you, I can't then later be like, you handled it all wrong. We may debrief one-on-one afterward, and we may think about the future, but I respect their decisions as professionals.
Describe how you go about engaging and affirming staff members.
Sorry, I need a little water. As I mentioned before, I do have a really large and diverse division at the department. And so as a leader, it's important that I keep my eye on the big picture vision, but that I also understand about their individual work streams and honor that work. I have both a work-based and a personal approach to this. On the work side, I make sure to understand and learn about what everybody is doing. Not to micromanage, not to get in the details so I can upset them, but so I can appreciate the amount of work that goes into a change or a new policy or just what they're doing day to day. Make it a point each year to learn about at least 3 new things that I've never learned about before. And since I've been at the department for 10 years, I know a lot about a lot of things. Whether or not that knowledge is useful or not, I think remains to be seen. But I do have a lot of experiences, but there are still lots of things I don't know. So I make sure to meet with those staff and have them share with me. And then I honor their expertise. I always start by saying, tell me what you know about the situation. How would you handle it? Start with them as professionals and them as experts. I think the second thing I do is more on the personal level. When I first became a deputy, I thought that what people really wanted from me as a leader was for me to be super professional, super detail-oriented, have content, just be really on the ball and kind of a work machine. And they do want me to know what I'm talking about. That is good. But what I realized over time is that they want to know who I am as a person, too. So we have all staff meetings, or I do emails to my team, personal emails to my team, and I always share personal details about my kids and my cat and the time I ran out of gas and whatever I'm struggling with as a mom and as a leader and as a worker and as a human. My team knows that we're colleagues, but we're people first. And what I found is that when I share about how I am a person in this workspace, in this world, it affirms them and engages them and helps them feel like it's okay for them to be people too. And it's really created a much tighter relationship between me and my division. So that is something that I have learned as a leader and would keep going forward.
How do you go about making decisions on controversial issues?
Luckily, this is something I have a lot of experience with. At the state and leading some of the more hot topic areas that I do, this is not something that is unfamiliar to me. If there's sufficient time on an issue, if we have time to really work on this issue, here's the process I would use is to first understand if consensus is possible. Are we going to find a middle ground on this or not? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And then also setting parameters for how much time we have to work on it. And then go back to that engagement of all the interested parties, the board, the community, principals, teachers, students, unions, everybody whose perspectives are important on the issue. Bring them in, set up a process where all voices can be heard. So using a facilitator or gathering feedback in a way that doesn't just let the loudest voices come through. And then get with the executive team, with the board, consider the different feedback, the different perspectives, and craft a decision. And then, again, pressure test it. When we finally have that decision, communicate really clearly what it is, why it was made, and if not everybody will be happy with it, but what I've learned over time is that if you can share why and how a decision was made, that helps people at least feel like the process was transparent and they have understanding of the decision. And then we make the call. I know part of being a leader is make the call, move forward, and stand up for the decision that we made. There's certainly another tough decision coming down the pike right after that. Education is kind of a series of decisions, I think. Sometimes, though, and obviously we're in a time right now that's a really good example of this, there isn't time for this elaborate multi-month decision-making process. So again, the work with COVID-19 is a great example of how districts, states, everyone is needing to make decisions quickly about things like safety and health and school closure and what to do about the hourly staff and how will students be fed when they're at home and not at school, and on down the list. And I know I'm preaching to the choir because I'm sure you're living this every day. So in those situations, as a leader, I would do things like call the other superintendents in the Ingham ISD, call the Ingham County Health Department, the Michigan Department of Education, seek guidance, work directly with the board. But I know that your current superintendent and the board are making decisions quickly in the best interest of students' health and safety, and I think that's something I would carry on as well. Sometimes decisions just need to go forward with the best information possible.
Tell us what budget development process you use and how you gain broad support for the final result.
When I think about budget development, I think the most important thing is understanding what the big strategic goals are. What do we really need to spend on as a state, as a division, or as a district? It's that, does anybody remember that big rocks analogy that was going around where it's like you have to put the big rocks in the container first and then the sand and the little rocks, but if you do it opposite, yeah. Obviously, the point of this analogy is that if you start with what's important, you can fit it all in. But if you don't do what's important first, that's a problem. And I think that really holds with budget development. We spend on what's important to us. Once we've set the big strategic goals, working with staff to fill in the sand and the little rocks and understanding some possible big rocks that we've missed. I know in Lansing, you do a lot of building-based budgeting. I think that's really critical because while there can be big goals that are on the minds of the executive team, the board, and the superintendent, there can also be really urgent needs at a building level that we might not be aware of. So making sure to get that feedback, I think is really key. And then once kind of there's a whole plan, communicating clearly and often and in as plain language as possible. I really admire how the board and the executive team here has approached your communication around your most recent sinking fund millage with the safe, warm, and dry. That is just a great example of how to be clear with people about what the money is going for. You don't have to have a CPA or be a CPA or have an MBA. You know that those monies are being invested in safety, warmth, and dryness. So I appreciate that sort of strategy and think it's really key with moving and keeping that broad support for a budget as you move forward.
What does an effective relationship between the board and superintendent look like, and how do you cultivate such a relationship?
I've had the opportunity in the last 10 years to work, I think I've mentioned, for 4 different state superintendents and with our State Board of Education, and watch how they worked with their boards and had the chance to talk with them about how were they creating relationships and how are they sustaining them. And in my time in districts around the state, particularly with the partnership districts, which I've worked really closely with over the last 4 years or so, again, a lot of time spent working with superintendents and boards, not as the superintendent or the board, but as it's almost like a superintendent residency, right? Like a chance to see this play out in a lot of different settings. I think out of all that observation, one of the things I've learned and believe in is that it seems the key to a good relationship is communication and transparency. Clear two-way communication between the superintendent and the board. And no surprises. I know you all don't want to be at Meijer getting your milk or at Costco trying to buy toilet paper or at Arts getting a pizza and have some community member come up and say, hey, I heard about this thing that's happening that you haven't heard about. I really appreciate the practice you have here of having executive staff share did you knows with the board. We'd love to continue that. And just making sure that we are talking and communicating. I think the other piece I've observed and think is important is each of us doing our jobs and fulfilling our roles. So the board sets policy, superintendent needs to implement that policy, and we need to seek clarity from each other on that if that's not going the way somebody wants it to. If we pursue this relationship with openness and responsiveness, I think it can be a strong one and in support of Lansing students.
Tell us about your experience in the development and implementation of one specific program change or initiative. What processes did you use? How did you involve others?
In 2017, we launched the Parent Dashboard for School Transparency. And that was one of those outgrowths of the ESSA plan. What's important about this and why I'm going to talk about it here is this was something the State Board of Education, this was a vision they set. They really felt it was important that we do a better job as a state providing parents with information on schools in a way that was accessible but provided without judgment. So not this is enough, this is too much, just this is what is. This is how performance looks like or staffing, different pieces of data. So one of the things that was important for me is making sure I understood their vision first. What did they really need and want from this parent dashboard? That involves several meetings where we talked about it, writing up a position paper, having them react to it until we said, yep, this is the roadmap that we're going to build. And then we needed to get building. We had about 6 months to build it. So my role, my process, I found a person within the organization, and I kind of tapped him and said, this is your baby. Let's make it happen. I had to scrounge around for resources. Often at the state, we do things without really a dedicated funding stream, and so we have to use kind of a hunt and find method of money gathering, or sometimes I call it couch cushion money strategy, like where is the vacancy factor, whatever we can find to make sure we could move forward. In this case, we needed to hire some talent to fill some of our gaps. Specifically, we needed a web designer. I don't know how much time you spent on the MDE's website, but it's not exactly the most user-friendly place to go. And so we knew that we needed some talent in making that if we wanted parents to use this website, we needed talent that we didn't have in-house. So we found a designer, and we solicited feedback from our customers, in this case, parents. So again, we scrounged a little more and got public policy associates to help us do some feedback forums, some focus groups, and user testing with parents. And then we took their feedback. You know, even if we thought this was a great way to talk about data, if parents said, this wording makes no sense to me or whatever, we changed it. As a result, we have the parent dashboard is our most visited website. It is actually user-friendly. You can find it, and you might like to use it. I had a lot of fun looking on it, preparing for this interview. And I also think, you know, I can be a very linear thinker. So someone who's learned to lay out the steps. But one of the things over time that I've learned with implementing different programs at the state is that you can lay out all the steps, but then you have to go back and think about all the possible variation. It's not going to be as straight of a line as you think. And so we saw that here. We had to spend a little more time developing than we thought, but we did create a product that was really successful.
What unique skills or experience do you bring to this position? Our superintendent needs a moment. I'll start again. What unique skills or experience do you bring to this position, and how will the Lansing School District be served by this?
I think I have several unique skills, and I think why they're unique and useful to Lansing is actually because of how Lansing is unique. You are the district of the capital city. In many ways, that makes you the district of the state. You have an extraordinary amount of scrutiny on what you do. The legislature watches, the governor's team watches, the press watches, the Michigan Department of Education watches. So what Lansing does really matters for the state as a whole. You're very much in the spotlight. So I think that having a superintendent with media training and legislative experience is important. And I have both of those things. I have quite a bit of experience with the media, talking about a wide range of topics, many of which are sometimes hard to talk about. I have learned about the importance of going into any interview with your 1 to 3 points you need to make and making them no matter what. I've also learned the importance of being succinct. That may surprise you. I've been a little verbose in this interview. I can do that, but not when I'm on the record, not when I'm in front of the media. I know it's not the time for offhand comments and being really clear about the message that needs to get across. I have extensive legislative experience, testifying in front of both the House and Senate, multiple committees on multiple issues. But more importantly than just testimony, I have experience working directly with legislators and building relationships with them. I've learned that legislators would prefer to hear about something from you offline, not in committee. They want you to come and share with them, and they want to be responsive to their constituents and to citizens of the state. I know how to build relationships. I have connections or understand how the lobby community works, the advocacy community. If I don't know the right person to call, I know someone who knows the right person to call. You know, this is a benefit of being in the capital area for the last 10 years. And I think that is something that would be beneficial to Lansing, especially when you are regularly asked to speak on education issues as a district. Like I mentioned, I'm a resident of this area, and I really mean this, I am a longtime admirer of the Lansing School District. So I've been sitting those 2 blocks over at the Michigan Department of Education, and watching you guys for the last 10 years and comparing the work here to other districts very favorably. Like I'm not, when I go out on school district visits, I'm always talking about what I've seen here. When I saw your enrollment numbers tick up this fall, I was so excited. I know that's the result of lots of hard work and tough decisions by this board, the executive team, previous leadership, and it's really starting to pay off. I saw in your PK3s, one school had 70% of students proficient in math. That is well above the state average. That's really amazing. And again, that's a testament to the hard work and the good stuff that's going on here in Lansing. Your graduation rates are up at all 3 high schools. I mean, I could go on and on with the things that excite me about this district, but I really would love to be part of what's going on here. I also think Lansing's at a crucial point where it appears to me it would be good, excuse me, to have a superintendent who can come in and pick up where we are and keep moving. Some leaders like to start over, make their own mark. But I think for me, what I would want to do is adopt the vision of the district and make it my own. And help learn, I would want to learn and listen, and then help us accelerate and elevate and do a better job, but keep the momentum going in the direction we're going.
Tell us how your previous professional experiences in education have influenced you as a leader.
I've been really blessed to work for a lot of really excellent leaders in my career, and I've learned a couple things. I've learned a lot of things, but the ones I'll talk about in the waning minutes of this interview are great leaders hire on potential. They challenge you for your best. They give you supports, but they also give you the freedom to succeed and fail. When I was a brand new teacher, that first year I was teaching in Brockton Public Schools, I was also the site coordinator for the 21st Century Learning Center program. I was so excited they picked me. I didn't think they would because I was a new teacher. So I had all these ideas, and I showed up to the first meeting with the other site coordinators from the other 3 junior highs, and I just was like, I know what we're going to do, and we're going to do it this way, and I was brimming with enthusiasm. The woman who ran the program at Central Office, her name was Maureen Murray, and she was just the perfect leader for me at that time. She didn't try to curb my enthusiasm or calm me down necessarily, although I probably could have used a little bit of calming at that point. But she really encouraged me to be excited, to have vision and move forward, but she helped me learn how to shape that, how to approach my colleagues and get them on board. She taught me a lot about just the logistics of running programs in a district. So she did a great job of teaching and shaping without squelching my fire, and I've always kept that lesson. And then, as I've mentioned, I've worked under 4 different state superintendents, all of whom are very different, and all of whom have taught me something really important about being a leader. So from Mike Flanagan, I learned the importance of making the tough decisions and sticking by them, no matter how many people were unhappy about them. Mike was very good at making the tough calls and moving forward. From Brian Whiston, I learned the importance of relationships and trying to get that consensus. Brian always wanted everybody in the tent. He wanted to see if we could find a way to make everybody at least a little bit happy. And even if not, he wanted to come out of that situation with a strong relationship with the person, even if they couldn't agree. From Sheila Alice, I learned the power of preparation. Sheila never goes into any situation anything less than impeccably prepared. She practices, she works hard, and she has really influenced me to do more of that. And from my current boss, he's new to the chair, Dr. Michael Rice, I've learned the importance of precision and precision in words. He has really encouraged us to think about how much words matter when we're communicating as the state. We're not just talking about the topic at hand, but really talking on behalf of education. And so being careful with each and every word is critically important.
Dr. Keesler, we appreciate your interest in becoming our next superintendent. Do you have any questions for us?
You know, it has been a long couple days for you guys, I know, and we're close on time. So with respect to the rest of your night, I don't think I'll ask any questions. I would just like to say, as I'm leaving, I hope I've been able to convey my excitement about this position. This is really the job I've wanted for a long time, and I would love to be part of coming here and dreaming big with all of you. Thank you for the time.